I want to start by remembering a friend that passed away a few years ago, who worked in the Schultz and had a Polish origin and spoke perfect Spanish. In February of 1995, I arrived to Bucheles, and he picked me up, me and my wife and my kids up. I had only spoken with him over the phone and hadn't met him personally. So when we left the airport, he was there waiting for us with a Colombian flag with my name and with a wheelchair because he had no legs. So later we went to the car, and the car was ready to be conducted. And later on, I had many wonderful experiences with him. We went to a syndicate meeting in Lima that ended up in a party. And Yannick was dancing salsa on his wheelchair. And he would move the wheelchair one way and another. And one time Yannick, that in one of the syndical meetings Colombia had, he brought his uniform to the Colombian parliament. And one of the memorable phrases of Yannick, he said, "What I've been able to gather about Colombia, people of the European Union, is that in Colombia it's easier to put together a guerrilla than organize a syndicate." That's the reality of the persecution against syndicate movements. Perhaps there's not that many left because they've already exterminated the vast majority of them. So I give homage to all of those men and women who have been sacrificed for work, fighting for labor, their rights as laborers and workers. I won the magistrate with 43 votes. And they elected me because I defend human rights. During the moment of voting, President Ivan Duque asked us to raise our right hand and to swear to respect the Constitution and the law. I put my left hand up. I thought nobody noticed that I made the swear statement with my left hand. But they noticed, and then they asked me as I was leaving the palace, the government palace, "Why did you raise your left hand?" And I said, "Well, because it's time that this state learns that there has to be a pluralism here, a political pluralism, that here there must be democracy. And those that have controlled this country for more than 200 years understand that change is coming." That's what I told the media. Well, I obviously had my first disagreements with my colleagues. We are 9 magistrates in the National Election Council. There's also one extra magistrate without a voice and vote, just part of the agreement with the FARC. His name is Pablo Cruz. who had been a part of the Consejo Nacional Electoral, the Supreme Electoral Council. They had treated him as a terrorist. The magistrates had treated him as a terrorist who never gave him the recognition as a magistrate. Whenever he started talking, they would leave the room so they wouldn't have to hear him. And he was a magistrate. And everybody had that title. But for him, they would just call him a delegate. So my first disagreement was men. Pablo Cruz is here because he's got the same title as us. 15 years of experience as a judge. He was also notary public. Why do you not give him the title of magistrate? Well, finally, they gave him the title. But after, they wouldn't recognize him, so he would go able to travel nationally or internationally. He may not have a vote, but he has the same rights as all of us who are sitting here. Well, and then there was an event organized with the Embassy of the United States at the University of Rosario. All the magistrates were invited, except him. So I told him, let's go together. So we went together to the University of Rosario. And they told him he's not on the list of magistrates. So I made him come in, sit next to me, and I told them, the people of the program of cooperation with the government of the United States, that if Pablo Cruz cannot sit here, I also won't sit at this table. Because you are not recognizing what the peace accords implies for Colombia. And finally, they had to accept that the magistrate Pablo Cruz was able to participate in the event at the University of Rosario with a program of cooperation with the United States in Colombia. So then came decisions of the National Electoral Council that were inconceivable. That one of them was denying the jurisdiction to the human people of Colombia. They didn't permit the recognition. It was 8 votes against 1. I told my colleagues, because they laughed, because they were celebrating that anti-democratic decision. I said, life is dialectic. Sooner or later, the Constitutional Court will end up recognizing jurisdiction to the Colombian human organization. And every single time they denied this, in particular, the people from the Democratic Center, they could always bring the reasons why they would deny it. But I kept saying that justice was in favor. So ultimately they took forever, but they did eventually recognize the jurisdiction to the Colombia Humana, which is the political party. I remember another discussion in relation to declarations that Juan Guaido had given in the Palacio of Nariño in a press conference that Iván Duque put together, where Juan Guaido declared that Gustavo Petro was financed legally in his presidential campaign by the government of Nicolás Maduro. That Iván Duque, in that moment, recognized as president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido. So what did I do with that information from Mr. Guaido? Well, I asked for an investigation by the Consejo Nacional Electoral, that they investigate, that they call Juan Guaido via the Colombian government to declare that he gives us proof that Gustavo Petro received money from the government of Maduro. He submitted and corresponded to another colleague. And of course, the government of Colombia never even made any attempt so Juan Guaido could come to the electoral authority to give us the supposed evidence that he was financed, that Petro was financed from the government of Venezuela. Never, the Colombian government never worked or collaborated to do investigations. But later on, there was another investigation that a narco trafficking, with the help of Nene Hernandez, who was killed in Brazil, had financed the campaign of Ivan Duque. And then we found out that declarations from an ex-senator from the Republic, Aida Neblano, who belonged to one of the most clans of the most corrupt clans in the country, El Clan Chan, that they had illegally given aid to Ivan Duque's campaign. So I asked that there would be an investigation. There were photos. Ivan Duque denied the relationship with narco Nene Hernandez, but he was an honorary invite of this event in 2018. And there was more and more photos that kept coming out where Nene Hernandez was photographed with Ivan Duque in several meetings. And that narco trafficker was also with other personalities of Ivan Duque's government from the Centro Democrático, which is a political party. And of course, when I told my colleagues that they should investigate, do a serious investigation, they elected 3 magistrates from the Central Electoral Electoral, this Supreme Electoral Council, so that they could do their own investigations. The woman that I mentioned earlier was in Venezuela. And this seems like a joke because she had been giving declarations from Venezuela to many communications press in Colombia. So I coordinated, asked my colleagues to ask the Maduro government and the constitutional government of Venezuela that they would allow her to have a declaration. And the joke is that they asked the president, they asked, the Colombians asked Juan Guaido, which is funny. Of course, Aida Merlan was never asked what she was doing in her relationship with Nene Hernandez and with their relationship with Ivan Duque. And they ended up archiving that entire investigation. So nothing was done in the investigation. So that's my historic vote over what happened and what my colleagues did and didn't do in that investigation. But I also talked about the financing, the supposed financing from the government of Venezuela to the presidential campaign of Gustavo Petro, because recently there was a magistrate in the Supreme Court of Justice that supposedly had the intention of getting evidence from Venezuela that this guy that is from Venezuela that's seeking refuge in Spain, that he would give proof that the government of Venezuela, that the government of Maduro had financed or is financing the presidential campaign of Gustavo Petro, supposedly. The vast majority of the media in the country, Caracol Television, through a reporter, made a press release from Madrid. Today, before the magistrate XYZ, there is a general blah 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 from Venezuela has denounced that Gustavo Petro did receive money for his presidential campaign from the dictatorial regiment of Nicolas Maduro. More words, more or less, that's what the press release said. And that was seen by millions of Colombians a few weeks ago. What would be the surprise that when the reporter published that, the judicial declaration hadn't been made? It was made the next day, and then this general the next day actually said nothing was given. He didn't bring out and declare a declaration against Gustavo Petro because he had no evidence. And that television channel then made a retraction, an incomplete retraction, and said that they transmitted incorrect information that was unverified, but they didn't mention Gustavo Petro's name, so it wasn't a full retraction. It didn't repair the damage that was caused among the public opinion. But the woman, Ida Merlano, who said the Consejo Nacional Electoral didn't actually do their due diligence to actually investigate her and talk to her, and she did declare beyond among the Supreme Court, and she corroborated that Ivan Duque actually received millions of pesos illegally for his campaign. So as a magistrate of the National Electoral Council, I solicited that there would be an indemnation and an investigation with this new evidence. And Jaime Ruiz, one of the magistrates, ordered diligence, ordered that the declaration of the Ms. Merlano would come out. Of course, our mandate ends now on the 31st of August, and nothing has really been done. But at least I wanted to leave some sort of historic precedent. I also wanted to comment that how we have advanced in this electoral council, National Electoral Council, with the process for electoral guarantees for this election in the 29th of May. All the formal decisions that need to take, distributions of TVs, cameras, resource distribution, guarantees in each department and tribunals. We have been making a series of decisions in relation to violations of resolutions over the excessive number of tables and publicated in excess over the entire country. There can't be more than 8 per candidate. So they ordered the retirement of the vast majority of these vallas. So I solicited that they would look into these accusations to present Petro as a terrorist, as a criminal. And the Consejo Nacional Electoral ordered that those would be taken off. So, from that point of view, the National Electoral Council has continued doing the function that they should be. After the elections on March 13th, where the software that was contracted by the registry was not working, and in every Colombian should have been able to register to vote virtually through the biometric and indicate their identification. And it was really interesting, but it failed. The software failed. And more than 800,000 Colombians and Colombia's men and women could not vote because the registration failed. And then also, many Colombians, when they went and showed up to vote, did not show up in the registry. They appeared not registered at the table, and so they weren't allowed to vote. In the same day of voting, on the March 13th, the website of the registry, where every citizen could go figure out where to go vote, was not working either for at least 3 hours. And then the most grave thing happened of the entire process when, on the 14th of March, the jurors, or no, the electoral witnesses, announced that at least 30,000 tables had not reported a single vote for el Pacto Histórico, which is not possible. It's not normal that would happen, that not a single vote would go for the party of Pacto Histórico. And so there was a series of irregularities. There were data transmitted in bad faith, were data that was transmitted, data for the certain parties, but not for the Pacto Histórico. That data never got transmitted. And something that was admitted on the 14th, and that Moy did tell the registry, in the form that consolidates all of the tallies, they left the Pacto Histórico in the very last column that was hard to for the jurors to find. And in the moment of transmitting the last column, many of them didn't see it and didn't transmit it. So maybe I could think, there wasn't bad faith. It could be an error in the design of the tally sheet. But when the director of the MOI was interviewed, how this has happened, that around 300,000 votes for the Pacto Histórico was never reported. If the forms have, departmental indications, and each department has a different form, how did 300,000 votes not appear or were not integrated in the pre-count of the national electorate? So there came the Great Crisis, because the entire process was put in doubt, the entire electoral process. And the explanation from the National Registry started blaming the jurors and wanted penal investigations on the jurors. And then what happened? Where did those votes appear for the Pacto Histórico? They appeared. And how did they appear? Because there was a process of scrutiny that is not in charge of the National Registry. And it's the conditions of scrutiny, which are municipal, state, departmental, and the national, which is the National Electoral Council, established that the Pacto Histórico had actually received 700,000 more votes that had not appeared initially. And that's why it became the most highly voted political force in the history of Colombia. In more than 200 years of this republic, for the first time, an alternative party won the legislative elections. And then the establishment's greatest fear came true. And they started this narrative, this intolerable narrative, to say that there was a plot, that there was a giant fraud committed by the National Registry with Gustavo Petro, with the Spanish firm, the multinational firm, and that all those votes were fraudulent, and that 300,000 jurors had voted twice in the elections of March 13th. A narrative that the President of Congress, Juan Diego Gomez, took to plant a seed of doubt over the electoral process. And the ex-president Andrés Pastrana, you guys have seen other elections in Latin America. He goes to all the elections in Latin America like a president or of mission. And this man, irresponsibly, is the one who projects that narrative at the national and international. And the extreme right of this country, the right of this country, candidates to the presidency take that narrative to put into doubt the electoral organization. Paradoxically, the one who actually has to go out and explain himself to the country that there is no fraud, that there is no possibility of fraud in this Sunday, is me. I had to go out there and defend the institution, to defend the transparency of the democracy in Colombia, to make sure that people, believe in this before we start a civil war and continue this bloodshed like they want. Well, we are now a few hours from beginning one of the most historic elections for Colombia, full of a lot of noise, but a lot of dangerousness. I have looked at WhatsApp messages from organizations of police and military. There have been accusations of militaries coming together and organizing, among them the commander of the military, naming themselves against Gustavo Petro, saying that the national constitution impedes, but the constitutional forces of Colombia impedes them from actually taking partiality in the presidency. But we have seen this in the messages. And the President of the Republic, I've been saying this since October of last year, and I've been asking the President of the Republic, Sir Iván Duque, you cannot interfere in the political debate. According to the Constitution, You represent the unity of the nation. You cannot take a side neither in favor nor against any candidacy. He never listened. I reminded them then, the president, that he's committing two violations: an illegal partiality to the electorate and an intervention that is prohibited for any political functionary. Of course, he has a special forum. He can only be investigated by the Congress of the Republic. And he has the majority to stop an investigation. But in order to prevent him from doing it, I said, remember that politics is dialectic. That today you're in power, but tomorrow the opposition could be in power. And today they have the control of Congress, but tomorrow that could definitely change. You could lose control of Congress. And the crimes against humanity and the war crimes that have been happening. And I will remind him permanently. And I have reminded him and the Ministry of Defense that when there were manifestations, protests, social protests against the government, where they assassinated several protesters, thousands of protesters, where they systematically shot kids in the face to disfigure their faces and take their eyes out. And they've achieved it. They've mutilated more than hundreds of young people. I've had the opportunity to talk to some of them. Beautiful women who they took out their eyes, one of their eyes. That is a criminal government. I've asked for investigations, and I've asked the National Fiscal and the President of Congress. He put a disciplinary action against me because I was questioning government decisions, and I defended myself. I am a citizen of the Republic. I am a public functionary, public official, and as a citizen of the Republic, and in Article 95 of the Constitution indicates that all citizens of this country must contribute to the defense of human rights. And that constitutional responsibility, Colombia, many years, if we had paid attention to that, we would have defeated this reign of terror. And the penal law says that if a public official knows that there are human rights violations being committed and does not denounce them, he is also responsible. And in my experience as a defender of human rights, I know when there are crimes being committed of that category. And this government has perpetuated those crimes against humanity. And that's why I keep asking, and I continue asking for more investigations, that the fiscals of the court investigate this. And of course, that bothers them very much what I say. Of course. They haven't wanted to see me in any national commission, electoral constituency. And when they have them, they don't invite me. When I arrive, there's no sign with my name. They leave me out. But every single time I arrive, I force them to put it, and they've had to listen to me. So I can say what others don't dare to say in their face. And to talk about the laws. And to use more than 5 billion pesos. Because what they do is they pay 5 billion pesos to people who nobody knows. So they keep putting people who don't have any experience. And somehow they win with 200,000 votes, and they're elected to the Senate with public money, with my taxes, with our taxes. With the things the people of Colombia are paying for. They're electing these people. This regime of corruption must respond sooner or later to all of the crimes that they have committed against the people of Colombia, against the democracy of Colombia. They will have to respond. And of course it bothers them when I tell them this. And they've threatened me. They've intercepted all my communications. And I tell them, each of you, I tell all the functionaries, all of them that works with me, none of them have a private life. None of them. And I've warned them. If you can't face that, if it's too much, leave, because if you're working with me, you run a risk. One of the best professionals of the National Electoral Council this past Thursday, they took his house illegally. They went into his house. When he came home, he found the door completely open. His apartment was ransacked. Yep. It was a sign that they're after us. So the Fiscalia went to the apartment. They hadn't left microphones. They were looking to see if there was any microphones or fingerprints. But they hadn't left anything. It was diligent. And when his wife was there, Dr. Nicholas, they wrote her a threat. She's a mother of 3 babies. This is the cowardice of this regiment of this country. This is the cowardice. Go threaten women, threaten children. Cowards. Cowards. 1,000 times cowards. What else do I have to tell you? It won't happen. We won't take it. Too much blood has been spilled of women, men, and children. Dignified men and women. So much blood has been spilled. And they haven't been able to stop the people of Colombia from moving to defend their human rights. They're not going to do it. They're not going to achieve it. And I will conclude with a personal anecdote. Dealing with all this state, these coups and the militarization, I made my suitcase and I put it in my cabinet with a few bits of clothes to have a plan B in case there is a coup. In case there's an inevitable victory for the popular vote tomorrow, there's a coup. And I asked my wife to do the same. Why don't you just put your suitcase together, and if we have the possibility of saving our lives, let's try it. We'll try it. We'll try saving our lives if there's a coup. And she told me, no. Let's take your suitcase. If there is a coup here, my love, we go out into the streets. And if it's our turn to die defending our democracy, my love, then we will die in the streets defending our democracy. Thank you very much.